Time perception is a field of study within psychology and neuroscience that refers to the subjective experience of time, which is measured by someone's own perception of the duration of the indefinite and continuous unfolding of events. The perceived time interval between two successive events is referred to as perceived duration. Another person's perception of time cannot be directly experienced or understood, but it can be objectively studied and inferred through a number of scientific experiments. Time perception is a construction of the brain that is manipulable and distortable under certain circumstances. These temporal illusions help to expose the underlying neural mechanisms of time perception. Pioneering work, emphasizing species-specific differences, was conducted by Carl Ernst von Baer. Experimental work began under the influence of the psychophysical notions of Gustav Theodor Fechner with studies of the relationship between perceived and measured time theories. William J. Friedman also contrasted two theories for a sense of time: the strength model of time memory. This posits a memory trace that persists over time, by which one might judge the age of a memory from the strength of the trace. This conflicts with the fact that memories of recent events may fade more quickly than more distant memories. The inference model suggests the time of an event is inferred from information about relations between the event in question and other events whose date or time is known. Another theory involves the brain's subconscious tallying of pulses during a specific interval, forming a biological stopwatch. This theory alleges that the brain can run multiple biological stopwatches at one time depending on the type of task one is involved in. The location of these pulses and what these pulses actually consist of is unclear. This model is only a metaphor and does not stand up in terms of brain physiology or anatomy. Associated brain regions. Although the perception of time is not associated with a specific sensory system, psychologists and neuroscientists suggest that humans do have a system governing the perception of time. It is composed of a highly distributed system involving the cerebral cortex, cerebellum and basal ganglia. One particular component, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, is responsible for the circadian rhythm, while other cell clusters appear to be capable of shorter-range timekeeping. Professor Warren Meck devised a physiological model for measuring the passage of time. He found the representation of time to be generated by the oscillatory activity of cells in the upper cortex. The frequency of these cells' activity is detected by cells in the dorsal striatum at the base of the forebrain. His model separated explicit timing and implicit timing. Explicit timing is used in estimating the duration of a stimulus. Implicit timing is used to gauge the amount of time separating one from an impending event that is expected to occur in the near future. These two estimations of time do not involve the same neuroanatomical areas. For example, implicit timing often occurs to achieve a motor task, involving the cerebellum, left parietal cortex, and left premotor cortex. Explicit timing often involves the supplementary motor area and the right prefrontal cortex. Two visual stimuli, inside someone's field of view, can be successfully regarded as simultaneous down to 5 milliseconds. One's visual temporal order judgment can be accurately assessed down to 20 millisecond resolutions. According to David Eagleman, different types of sensory information are processed at different speeds by different neural architectures. The brain must learn how to overcome these speed disparities if it is to create a temporally unified representation of the external world. This characteristic of the brain is referred to as temporal binding. Not only does the brain temporally coordinate among different senses, but also among different sensory modalities. For example, for vision, this would include a coordination between an object's edges, motion, angles, color, etc. In the popular essay, Brain Time, by David Eagleman, he suggests that, if the visual brain wants to get events correct time-wise, it may have only one choice. wait for the slowest information to arrive. To accomplish this, it must wait about 1/10 of a second. In the early days of television broadcasting, engineers worried about the problem of keeping audio and video signals synchronized. Then they accidentally discovered that they had around 100 milliseconds of slop. As long as the signals arrived within this window, viewers' brains would automatically resynchronize the signals. He goes on to say that this brief waiting period allows the visual system to discount the various delays imposed by the early stages. However, it has the disadvantage of pushing perception into the past. There is a distinct survival advantage to operating as close to the present as possible. An animal does not want to live too far in the past. Therefore, the 1/10 of a second window may be the smallest delay that allows higher areas of the brain to account for the delays created in the first stages of the system while still operating near the border of the present. This window of delay means that awareness is postdictive, incorporating data from a window of time after an event and delivering a retrospective interpretation of what happened. The human brain's visual cortex is more active when an individual attempts to estimate the duration of a visual stimulus. The primary motor cortex is more active when an individual attempts to estimate the duration needed to complete a specific action. The auditory cortex is more active when an individual attempts to estimate the duration of a given sound stimulus, and so on. This suggests that time estimation may be a low-level process. Specious present. The specious present is the time duration wherein a state of consciousness is experienced as being in the present. The term was first introduced by the philosopher E. R. Clay in 1882, and was further developed by William James. James defined the specious present to be the prototype of all conceived times, the short duration of which we are immediately and incessantly sensible. In Scientific Thought, D. Broad further elaborated on the concept of the specious present, and considered that the specious present may be considered as the temporal equivalent of a sensory datum. A version of the concept was used by Edmund Husserl in his works and discussed further by Francisco Varela based on the writings of Husserl, Heidegger, and Merleau-Ponty.